Welcome to the 44th episode of Virtually Unbreakable Podcast, where we inspire you to live happier and more fulfilling lives. My name is Ella, and I'm your host. Today, my guest is Leighton Dewitt. Leighton is a mindfulness coach, a yoga teacher, and a qualified mental health first aider. Leighton helps busy men create healthy habits, reduce their stress levels, and by doing so, improve their relationships. Leighton does this through a holistic approach, combining the connection between body and mind. And today we're talking about creating emotional resilience in men. Leighton, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm really good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. It's my pleasure. Leighton, if you could tell me in few words, what is it that you do exactly? So today we're talking about a very important topic, which is creating good mental health in man and positive mental health in man and creating healthy habits and emotional resilience. Why is this topic so close to your heart, and what is it that you do for men? How do you help them?
So for me, I went through a period in my life where I was working in the corporate world. It was very stressful. I was suffering with anxiety and depression. And as a man, we struggle to talk about the issues that we're going through. So what I essentially do now is I work with busy men on a one-to-one basis. We look at their lifestyle and we look how we can implement healthy habits. And they're based around 4 pillars. So it's sleep, nutrition, movement, and mindfulness. So I'll look at these aspects in my client's life and see how we can improve each of them. And for me, it's not about going all in at once. It's about making little changes that are able to be used consistently.
Maintained on a regular basis, right? And so that's very interesting. So the 4 pillars you mentioned: sleep, nutrition, physical exercise or physical activity, and mindfulness, right?
Yeah, I call it movement because I don't want it to be associated with having to go to the gym for an hour a day. Movement can be anything, right? From walking to yoga to being in the gym.
Sure. Okay. And do you really find that it's the improvement in men only really happens where all 4 pillars are addressed?
No, it doesn't need all 4. And each week I will focus on one element at a time rather than trying to change everything in one go. I think as humans, we struggle to make massive changes in a very short amount of time. So for me, it's all about focusing on one small bit at a time and just gradually. The idea is that after a certain period of time, we've changed our lifestyle so that it's consistently using these healthy habits, even if it's just for a few minutes per day.
Sure. And before we dive into emotional resilience specifically, what do you notice from your work with busy men? What seems to be the most common issue that needs to be addressed in order to improve? So I understand all those 4 pillars are important, but what it seems to be the most persistent problem that you see in your clients on a regular basis?
I think out of those 4, there isn't one particular that's always needs to be worked on. But the trait that is consistent with men is that very often they don't have a safe space to be themselves, and talk about their emotions and their feelings. And as men, we've always got this front of having to be manly.
And all figured out, right? You're supposed to have it all figured out. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which puts massive pressure on the men from young age, you could say.
So for me, and there's probably scientific data behind this as well, but if we don't deal with our emotions, then they tend to come out in other ways, and often in ways that we don't want them to. So it might be when we're in the boardroom at work, or it might be when we're at home with the family or children, and it's kind of like we've bottled these emotions up, and by talking about them, it enables us to deal with them in a safe environment and kind of notice them coming up rather than just reacting.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I have recently just written a piece of content about releasing emotions and the benefits of doing so. And I think so many people don't realize that, because so often we are told to stop crying, to not be silly, or to not be, oh, don't worry, you're just getting really emotional now. There is this negative connotation to being emotional and releasing your emotions. And in fact, it happens so naturally from young age, when we as children are being told on regular basis to not cry, or to behave ourselves, and we almost supposed to fit in that pattern of behavior, right? That suits everybody else but not us at the time. And I think parents do it subconsciously. They don't realize that by telling their child stop crying or snap out of it, they are not doing them any favors, actually. But you are mentioning a very important point here about releasing those emotions, and about letting them acknowledge. What's really important as well, I find, is that you have to acknowledge how you feel. You have to acknowledge it, and you have to think about it, and you have to sit with that emotion, and then so you can release it out of your system. You will not be able to release it out of your system if you don't process it. And I think that might be that part of the process that many people find quite uncomfortable, is because some emotions we feel, there's such a big variety of them, right? There's anger, there is sadness, there is rage, there is jealousy, there's happiness, there's joy. There's such huge range, and so many events that we participate in are often acting as triggers for us to think in a certain way first, and then what goes with it, experience an emotion or a feeling, right? So the event happens first, something happens, we have certain thoughts related to that event, and suddenly we have certain emotion related to that. And it's often so uncomfortable and it's so unpleasant that we try to distract ourselves from it. But the true strength and power lies in the ability to sit with that emotion and feel it, no matter how uncomfortable it is, and perhaps try to understand, why am I experiencing this? Why am I feeling like this right now? Is there a reason? And perhaps there is an emotion that keeps coming back, right? So often in our life, we experience the same emotions in the same situations. And it's crucial that we learn, why do they keep coming back? But anyway, I could write a lecture or have a lecture about that. I'm really passionate about that topic, as you've noticed.
I can tell, yeah.
But I do think this is super relevant to men, though, which is why I'm talking about this at length, because like you've said yourself, that inability to express emotions and talk when something bothers you is, for so many men, an unhealthy habit, right?
Well, it's ingrained into us. We shouldn't show these emotions. And I remember, I think I must have been about 13 when my dad said to me, stop crying, you're a man now, men don't cry. And it's kind of like, that is in you subconsciously. And I guess it's a generational thing as well. It is more spoken about now. It's becoming more acceptable for men to talk about their emotions and their feelings. But it's still ingrained into us from a very young age.
100%.
And it's not until we start seeking help from therapists, or we meet other men who are more open-minded to speaking about things like that, that we then can start feeling a bit more comfortable, and then feeling these emotions, and
And
having a cry every now and again.
exactly, we didn't mention this, but often what happens when we don't, in order to distract ourselves from a negative emotion, we fall into a pattern or of behavior or a habit, like you said.
Mhm.
And it could be anything, but very often these addictions, as we call them, are not, they can persist for years. And for men, alcohol is a very common one, right? Unfortunately. But can you tell me, so today we're talking about emotional resilience. Can you tell me, what is your definition of emotional resilience? What does that mean to you?
So for me, resilience is about bouncing back. Emotion is, I would describe it as the feedback response from our body, in the sense that while we feel it in our mind, our body will absorb it.
Yeah.
And when we talk about emotional resilience, I think men in general are very resilient, and they'll cover things up, and they'll have this mentality of, let's keep going, I can deal with this. But when it comes to emotional resilience, they perhaps, rather than actually dealing with the emotion, they just compartmentalize it or cover it with something else. So they're not actually dealing with it. So while they're being resilient and getting on with what they need to do, it's not necessarily
They're not
emotionally
processing their emotions. And by doing that, they're not in touch with who they truly are as a human, as a man. So they are moving away from their dreams and their goals, right? Subconsciously, not realizing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of, we we will then think we know what we want to do because we've got a target in our mind, but without dealing with that emotion or that the stress or the whatever came up, we won't really know, like you say, what our desires are. And I think then we become very easily influenced by our surroundings, and by society, in terms of what we're going after and what we want to achieve, instead of what we truly want deep down inside.
Correct. Very, very wise words. So I've studied the concept of self-esteem and self-worth for a long time. I actually wrote a book about it, Teach Your Kids to Build Positive Self-Image, which is based on concept of self-esteem. And that self-esteem and self-worth, exactly what you said there at the end, when we don't feel worthy, when we don't accept ourselves, both men and women, for who we really are, we are looking for external sources of approval, and we get really hooked on that. So we are looking for people, events, items, physical items, material object to make us feel good about who we are. And you see that a lot in men. I'm not saying it's something that is exclusive to men. I'm sure women are also, they can also fall into addictions such as spending money or shopping, right? That can be an addiction. But I think that low self-esteem, that lack of self-acceptance in man, that often stems from inability to connect with yourself through emotions, can have a very negative long-term effects on men and their families and their relationships, because they're not truly in touch with who they are, right?
Yeah, the other thing there is that we then seek validation from other things, and also, which is a common theme with everyone, is the instant gratification. So it's instant gratification and validation of ourselves and our worth.
Yeah, Yeah. And have you seen that in your work with men? Have you seen that
Oh
being
yeah,
a
absolutely.
problem?
And I saw it with myself in I call it my past life, but yeah, I see it a lot.
What can you give me example of what that would be so our listeners can picture it better?
So I think for me, it was ingrained into me that from society and my family that life should be a certain way. I should work a certain number of hours per week. I should live in a certain type of house. I should be in this relationship by this age and have children by that age. And kind of like all these
Like
life
a template,
milestones of,
right? You need to fit in
yeah, of
a
what
template.
life
Yeah.
should be like. And I was going through a really stressful period in my life where
Mm.
I was just on autopilot,
Yeah.
and I blocked everything out, and I was using things like caffeine and alcohol, and even the gym. I was using it as something to take my mind off of the stresses and the anxieties that I was going through. Um, so it's like a mix of like trying to be healthy, but actually you're just covering up
Yeah.
the emotion that needs to be released.
Yes.
And yeah, so then you'll seek it, and then you'll start doing things like going out more often and trying to make friends with people that probably aren't, maybe they're not the right type of friends for you,
Mm.
because you're seeking validation from
And
people to
approval, social approval, right?
approval. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm.
Um, so, and then, yeah, I don't know, we'll probably touch on this a bit later anyway, but it's not until, for me, that I started seeing a therapist, and it's quite, there's still a stigma about seeing therapists.
Of course.
And I was quite lucky that in my life I had people around me that spoke very positively about it and encouraged me to do therapy.
Mm.
And it's not until you have that safe space that you can then realize, well, actually, I don't want to live my life like this, and actually I don't have to do
Mm.
it the way that I thought I was
Yeah.
supposed to.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think
Well, well
as you
done.
say, it can take
Yeah,
many
well
years.
done you for opening up and seeking help, because so many men don't have the courage or the support around them to look for help, or they
Mhm.
feel perhaps they don't get, perhaps they would want to seek help, perhaps they would want to look for a solution that doesn't have to be necessarily therapy. For some men could be something else, but it's
Yeah.
the acknowledging that you do need help, you do need to understand yourself better, you do need to take proactive steps towards improving your life in whatever capacity, if that is relationships, if that is how you may be dealing with addiction, or how you see yourself, how you are perhaps have formed negative beliefs that are holding you back from living your life to your full potential. Whatever area that is that acknowledging as a man that you do need help, you need to reach out. That is step number one. So well done for that, and well, thank you for sharing, because that is very inspirational. I want to strive away from negativity in this podcast, but one of the reasons why we were talking about this, apart from the fact that men are as important as women, they always have been and there always will be, and they add lots of value to our society and our family, or any society for that matter. Apart from all of that, I also want to mention that suicide is a number one killer in men. So one of the main reasons, we need to work harder, both men and women, to help men seek help. It's to improve their mental health, so they don't feel like they need to end their life to solve their problems, right?
Yeah. One of the
Mm.
things I think about a lot is having good connections,
Yeah,
in the sense of people that you can open up to.
yeah.
And one of the things that I've actually done quite recently is started a men's health and mindfulness group.
Mm.
And it's just a small
Yes.
group where men can come in and kind of open up a little bit. And it's very early days, and you can tell that people have that nervousness of opening up in front of other men because they've got that front there. But yeah, that's something that I'm
Is it
working
face to
on.
face or is it via internet?
It's a Facebook group.
Facebook group. Okay.
So,
perhaps we can include the link to the group in the show notes if anybody wants to join.
I think eventually. Sorry.
Can you tell me how do you deal with stressful events in your life? What do you do?
So I have 3 main practices now that I fit into my weekly schedule. One is just breathing exercises. So in yoga, it's pranayama, but you could also do like box breathing, which is quite simple. 4 seconds in, hold for 4, 4 seconds out, hold for 4. And there's other breathing techniques that I'll try and do for 10 or 15 minutes a day just to calm myself down. Meditation for me, so I always struggled with meditation before because I was so worried about what I needed to get done. And I just didn't give myself time to sit there and be with my thoughts or try. There's so many meditation apps now, just to sit there for 5-10 minutes to listen to one of those. It's so beneficial. But yeah, I didn't realize that before. And my mentality was, I don't have time to meditate. And I think there's a saying that if you don't have time to meditate for 10 minutes, then you should meditate for 20.
Yeah, I see. Makes lots of sense. I've seen somewhere a quote, you need to slow down to speed up. So you really need to invest your time in your well-being as both man and a woman in order for you to become more effective, to have better results, to have better emotional resilience, and be able to deal with stress and pressure in a least destructive possible way, right?
And the way I explain it to people that I'm encouraging to meditate more is that it will help you make better decisions throughout your day, which is ultimately going to make you more efficient.
Sure. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I try to meditate daily, and it helps me in a number of ways. And one of the main one is feeling more in control of my day and of the decisions I take. So I totally agree with that. Okay. Well, and the last question, this podcast is Virtually Unbreakable is a podcast about self-improvement and self-care and happiness. Can you share what makes you happy?
So I guess a couple of things. So the first thing in terms of self-improvement and development, I love learning and I love growing as a person. That makes me really happy. Being grateful for what I have in my life makes me happy. Being kind and helping others makes me happy. And I would say deep and meaningful connections
wonderful
is really important.
So friendships. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining today, Leighton, on the show. For any of you who is interested in Leighton's profile or his work or his support circle for men, I will include that in the show notes. And thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you all and hearing from you next week on Wednesday. Thank you. Bye.